You want to know if World of Warcraft Midnight is worth playing in 2026, and the answer to that question isn't as straightforward as you might think, because Midnight makes some big changes to the game. You've got player housing, simplified classes, and even major changes to combat add-ons. Some of this makes the game better, some of it doesn't, and for some players this might be the best WoW has felt in years. For others, it could be a deal breaker. So instead of just giving you a yes or no answer, I'm going to break this down properly, starting with your first 10 hours in the game, and ultimately what the game feels like during the end game. And more importantly, whether you will actually enjoy it, because that depends heavily on the type of player that you are. Are you casual or hardcore? Do you play solo or as part of a group or guild? Are you here for mount collecting, or do you want to push high-end content? Maybe all of those things. We'll go through all of it in this video. What works, what doesn't work, and who Midnight is really for. Let's start with your first 10 hours. Your first 10 hours in Midnight are likely going to feel great, especially if you enjoy questing and exploring. If you're brand new to the game does a pretty decent job of easing you in. You get a streamlined introduction, and you'll be guided through leveling in Dragonflight, with buffs that make the whole process a bit smoother for you. Returning players will have the story catch-up option, a short instance questline to get you back up to speed. But it's completely optional, so if you already know what you're doing, you can skip this. And if you've got a level 80 ready to go, you can jump straight into Midnight's campaign and start exploring the new zones immediately. This is where WoW still shines. The art, the music, the zones, they carry the early hours pretty hard. Silvermoon City is of course the main hub this time around, fully revamped, and it looks incredible. It fits the Blood Elf identity perfectly, and there are some small touches, like the music callbacks to the Burning Crusade expansion, that really sell the nostalgia. It's a cool touch to have a Horde-only area in Silvermoon, complete with some iconic music that only plays in this area, but sadly this feels mostly deserted, as many players just simply use the other amenities in the main area. Once you step outside the gates of Silvermoon into Eversong Woods, that same quality does continue. The zones stay true to their original design, but with a modern polish that makes them feel fresh without losing their identity. As you level, you'll be following the main campaign. There are plenty of cutscenes, and overall these have improved quite a lot, but there are still some janky moments. For the most part, the animations feel better and the characters are more expressive. The story itself is decent. It's not bad, but it doesn't really stand out either. We already know the stakes are high, and Blizzard directly said that there would be some major character deaths in this expansion, but the level up campaign as you build towards the conflict with Xal'atath and the Voidstorm is sometimes predictable and not overly thrilling, although it does set up the rest of the story quite nicely. However, once you engage with the side quest content, there are some real gems to be found. Some of these side quests are genuinely more memorable than the main story. In Zoloman, there's a questline called The Sound of Her Voice that takes a turn a lot of players won't expect, so I won't spoil that story for you now. Over in the Voidstorm, the Nethersent questline adds small but meaningful details, such as NPCs reacting differently depending on your class, what type of magic you use, and even your emotes. And these moments make the world feel reactive, like it actually notices what you're doing. These details, tied with the immersive zones, really sell those first few hours. The world feels dense. There's always something pulling you in, whether that be side quests or raids. It could be treasures and puzzles to complete, or a new cave to explore. A lot of players chose to avoid flying at first, just to stay immersed and take it all in properly, which is not a bad idea. By the time you hit around the 10-hour mark, returning players are likely to be at the endgame point and starting to engage with those systems. So overall, those first 10 hours feel very immersive, structured and easy to get into. There's something there for everybody, but the question is, what happens when that structure falls away and the game opens up at max level? This is where the game shifts. There's a running joke in World of Warcraft that the real game begins at max level, and honestly, that's still pretty true. Once you hit level 90, what you do next depends heavily on the type of player that you are. If you're more casual, there's no shortage of things to do, but not all of it stays meaningful for a very long time. One of the bigger additions in Midnight is the prey system. It adds a bit more tension to the open world in a particular zone, where you're tracking a target that's also actively hunting you. Early on, this felt rewarding, especially on the highest difficulty, Nightmare, where the gear was actually worth going for, but that didn't last very long. Now, most of that gear gets outclassed pretty quickly by other content, although to be fair, the system still has value if you're into collecting mounts and appearances as well as achievements. Alongside Prey, Delves have returned, which have been refined with some small improvements since their introduction in the War Within. You've got a new companion, Valera Sanguinar, who can put out some serious damage once she's leveled, and she does serve as quite a useful companion throughout these delves. The objectives feel more varied, and with the daily rotation, they stay fresh for longer. Right now, they sit in a good place, relevant, repeatable, and actually enjoyable to run, with the fact that they can provide hero track gear as rewards, as well as myth crests from tier 11 bountiful delves. They do remain relevant for most players. Then you've got professions. Now these have been simplified slightly, but they still carry over the same progression system that began back in Dragonflight. If you enjoy crafting or gathering, there's a lot here to sink your teeth into, but there is a catch. The specialization system locks you in early, and right now there's currently no way to respec. For newer players especially, that can be pretty punishing, and it does feel like something that needs changing. There's no real way of knowing where you should be spending those points unless you really take some time to learn about it, which likely involves external research, putting off many players instantly. And then you've got the world events, so these are something that most players will engage with early on, mainly for gear progression and renown. At first they feel worthwhile. You're earning sparks for crafting, you're building up your renown, unlocking varied rewards at a steady pace. That part works well, but once you've hit max renown and your gear improves, the incentive drops off fast. They can start to feel less like content and more like chores. And some of them really don't hold up over time. The Singularity event is a prime example. It's fine the first couple of times, but repeating it quickly becomes frustrating, especially when you've got players AFKing in the middle, causing runs to risk failure with very little you can actually do about it, while they sit there and get full credit for completion. But at least there's some variety with these weekly world events, with the crazy abundance system that saw some heavy iteration early on, and the short artifact questlines for the Haranir faction, which again were perfectly okay first time round, but now players have completed them all once, you simply have to repeat ones you've already done, so the enjoyment can start to fall off pretty fast. So there is one major addition to World of Warcraft that we have not discussed yet, and that is of course player housing. It's no exaggeration to say that this is perhaps the best iteration of player housing that we've seen in any MMORPG so far. Blizzard are great at borrowing concepts from other games and improving on them, and this is a prime example. Issues from other games, such as the non-permanent and difficult nature of acquiring and owning your home from Final Fantasy XIV, are non-existent here. Any player can easily purchase a house, level it up to increase the amount of rooms you can build and items you can fill them with, and collect decor items from many different sources. It's a super accessible feature for those playing solo or if you're part of a guild, with options for different neighbourhood types. This was a massive addition to the game and something players have wanted for years, and I really do think that Blizzard have done an excellent job with its implementation. There are of course some gripes, such as the small outdoor decor limit being quite restrictive, but the housing team are quite good at communicating their progress and decisions, as well as the plan going forward. Seeing what the community have managed to make with housing has been mind-blowing at times, and it's great that we've had this system for a while now, and people are still pushing the limits of creativity. It's yet to be seen if housing stays as a core component of the game over the years to come, but for now, it's an excellent side activity that can be completely ignored if you have no interest, or for you to sink hours and hours into collecting, building, and enjoying your space with your friends if you desire. Player housing, massive win. So across these first 100 hours, there's definitely a lot to engage with. You also start to see though where things fall off, what keeps your attention, keeps you engaged and having fun, and what doesn't. And that becomes even more obvious when you start pushing into the more serious progression-focused side of the game. This is where we dig deeper. Once you move past the casual systems, your progression really starts to revolve around Mythic Plus and gearing efficiency. Mythic Plus is still one of the core pillars of Endgame, and in Midnight it's arguably more important than ever. If you're trying to gear efficiently, this is where most of your time is going to go. It's fast, repeatable, and consistently rewarding, and because of that, it ends up overshadowing a lot of the other content. Gearing overall is pretty straightforward. It has been simplified slightly in Midnight Season 1. There are multiple paths to gear, for example world content, crafting, raids, Mythic Plus, and so early on, as you gear up, it feels very flexible. There's lots of options. You can play how you want and still make progress. But that freedom doesn't really last. The more serious you get, the more funneled you become into a specific loop, which usually revolves around clearing the raid, running Mythic Plus, filling your vault, pushing higher and higher keys, and repeating that week on week. That this becomes the most efficient way to progress by a clear margin, because of course you can only do the raid once per week, and what if you don't have a guild or team to progress Mythic raiding with? You only get left with Mythic Plus or high-end PvP. And this is where the trade-off starts to show, because while Mythic Plus feels great to run, it does start to devalue other parts of the game. Heroic raiding being the clearest example. For more casual players, it still has value. It's accessible, structured, and a fun pillar of the game when it comes to PvE content. But for higher end players, it quickly becomes irrelevant. The rewards just don't compete with Mythic Plus or Mythic raiding. Many players, including myself and my guild, we have outgeared heroic raiding without even really needing to clear the heroic raids. It's been purely from Mythic Plus. So the system ends up in an interesting place. On one hand, gearing is more accessible than ever. You've got more options, less friction, and it's easier to keep your character progressing, but on the other hand, the same accessibility flattens the experience a little bit. Different activities start to feel less meaningful because one path is clearly more efficient than the rest. So the real question becomes, is this a bad thing? And there has been some debate about this recently. If you're a casual player or someone with limited time, probably not. You can gear up fast, you can stay relevant, and enjoy the game without feeling locked out or far behind. But if you're more progression focused, you might find yourself funneling into Mythic Plus whether you want to or not. With all this said, this season of Mythic Plus has seen an incredible amount of engagement, and is arguably one of the best seasons we've had so far. The dungeons are fun and varied, and it's definitely one of the easiest tuned seasons we've had as well, meaning it feels more accessible to more players, and PvE content does still suffer though from a lack of tank players, which is currently a core problem of the game, and something that doesn't seem to have any easy solution other than just buffing the hell out of tanks. Let's dive into some pain points and look at some positives. On the plus side, modern WoW is an MMO that has taken steps to respect the time of the player more, with examples such as account-wide renown, saving you from repeating grinds, or the gear progress on your main character making upgrades cheaper for your alts. The game is much more casual player friendly than it ever has been, especially if you play multiple characters. The simplifications to many classes and specs, as well as the gutting of combat add-ons in Midnight's pre-patch, combined with the option of the rotation helper or single button assist, has lowered the barrier for entry for many players, encouraging them to start the game or do content they would have previously avoided, which is a massive net positive for the game as a whole. Positives aside, there are some core pain points to the game, and I'll mention two of the ones that affect me the most, beginning with the issues that still persist when it comes to the factions. So we all know that World of Warcraft started with this war between the two factions, hence its name, and the thought of helping each other, let alone being in the same guild together, was unthinkable, but now that's entirely possible. So through the story over the years, we've learned to work together, being able to do more content like Mythic Plus and raids together. However, this is so jarring when you try and do anything less than that. Want to do a simple time walking dungeon on your horde character with your alliance friend? You can't, unless you get a group of 5 players together. Want to invite somebody from the opposing faction to your guild? You can't do that. Someone of the same faction can, or you need to add them as a Battle.net friend. This is just silly at this point. These points of friction seem very unnecessary in the modern version of WoW, and it's about time they were abolished. Let us all just play seamlessly together regardless of faction in all types of content. Second pain point is communication, inside and outside of the game. So the game itself sometimes does a very poor job explaining systems to players, which can make it seriously confusing and daunting for newcomers. But even externally, over channels such as the forums and social media, Blizzard are often slow to communicate changes and issues with the player base, which can be a major source of frustration. It's something they repeatedly say they're working on, and sometimes we see evidence of that. For example, the recent patch was a bit of a shitstorm. However, they issued a formal apology to the entire player base, but still, perhaps those bugs shouldn't have happened in the first place. So, is World of Warcraft worth playing in 2026? The answer is a resounding yes, but with some important caveats. Midnight gets a lot right. Those first 10 hours are some of the most immersive WoW has felt in a long time. The world design, the atmosphere, and the side content, it all pulls you in and makes you want to keep on playing. And even beyond that, there's a ton of things to do. The game is more accessible than it's ever been, gearing is smoother, systems are easier to understand, and it respects your time far more than older versions of the game did. But that lower barrier for entry does come with a trade-off. Once you hit the end game, the experience can start to narrow. If you care about progressing efficiently, you'll find yourself funneling into Mythic Plus, on a fairly repetitive loop, and over time that does make parts of the game feel less meaningful than they should be. So whether Midnight is worth it really comes down to what kind of player you are. If you're a casual player and you enjoy questing, exploring, collecting, and just playing at your own pace, you'll probably have a great time here for a long time. There's more than enough content, and the game makes it easy to stay engaged without feeling overwhelmed. But if you're a more serious progression-focused player, you might enjoy it a lot at first, but long term you will start to notice the limitations. The endgame loop is solid, but it's not especially diverse. So overall, Midnight is a very strong expansion, especially in its early to mid game, but it's not a perfect one. And that's okay. If you're looking for a polished, accessible version of WoW with a lot to offer up front, it's absolutely worth jumping into, whether you're brand new to the game or a returning player. But if you're chasing a deep, varied endgame that holds your attention for a long time, just be aware of what you're getting yourself into. Do let me know what you think about the game. How would you rate Midnight currently? We've had it for over a couple of months now. I've played Midnight every day since the expansion launched, and long before that as well. So let me know what you think and we'll have a discussion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I've been the Drowsy Dragon. If you did enjoy the video, please do leave it a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more content all about World of Warcraft from me. I'd love to give a big shout out and thank you to our channel members here on YouTube and over on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support of the channel, and if you'd like to do the same, you can support with the links in the description below. Take care guys, have a lovely day. I've been the Drowsy Dragon, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers!